to the team of staff that have been guiding us through this exercise. Thank you to all the jurisdictional committee members and our private committee members. Appreciate the heavy lifting that's been done. So we'll go ahead and call to order, and I'll turn it over to you, Dan, and the team for agenda item number 2, which is RTA financial health indicators analysis and reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if it's okay, I would just like to give a brief overview of the agenda today to start. And if anyone needs to leave early, if they could let us know in case we need to rearrange anything. But we have, starting with number 2, the financial policy discussion items from our last meeting ready to go. There were 5 items there with the oversight, delivery, and transparency. That was related to that section of the administrative code. We just have a couple of comments on that to walk through, in addition to any others. With 4, we only have 1 item left for our POPs discussion to make sure we have consensus on. But we also wanted to discuss, just to confirm, we did send out the annotated version of the Word document. So if anyone notices any discrepancies, just to please let us know. But that should hopefully wrap up that part of the discussion. We did add for item number 5, the jurisdictional breakdown of funding to confirm where the committee feels would be most appropriate to incorporate into the admin code. And then as part of the final item, with future agenda items and timeline, we did add just a brief discussion of the administrative code table of contents for consideration. Early on in this discussion, there was some talk of prioritization of the efforts, including the POPs being up front. So just wanted to circle back to that and make sure that we're formatting in a way that's acceptable to the committee. So if there are no further questions or time constraints from anyone, Mr. Chair, I could turn it over to Jamie to jump into item number 2.
Let me just check with the committee members. Any questions for the team? Okay, looks like we're clear, Dan, so take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. So just to briefly introduce this item, I'll turn it over to Adam, but this is a continuation of our conversation last week on the plan health indicators, specifically the financial performance measures. Just as a reminder, the goal of this effort is really to demonstrate and coordinate with our member agencies on what we're going to be tracking and how, and building confidence for RTA Next. And so a lot of progress has been made in those discussions. We've talked about the cash flow analysis, tracking construction cost indices for decision support, and got pretty far in the conversation last week on the potential additional revenues. So Adam's going to lead us through the conversation today to walk through those recommendations that were shared with the committee last week. And he also has slides ready to share if we want to walk through those calculations again. So with that, I'll turn it over to Adam. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jamie. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. We'll go ahead and send a request to share screen here. All right. So thanks, everybody, for the great discussion last week. Made a lot of headway. Thought we would start off by just reviewing what those recommendations were that we had and kind of work backwards from there. I'll read through them, kind of do a double check, see how everybody's feeling about those, and then we can review those slides or have any discussion as at the pleasure of the committee. So the first one, potential additional revenue adjustment. Our recommendation is that the GDP price deflator is the metric that we apply to project costs when calculating the available PAR. We'll pause there. How does everybody feel about that? Does this warrant further discussion? I think we were close to consensus, if not fully reached last week.
Do any of the committee members have comments or feedback? I think that, the team was pretty comfortable. The committee side was pretty comfortable with GDP price deflator, with the understanding that this would also be complemented by other indices And I don't see that reflected here. It might be helpful to indicate that the GDP price deflator will be the primary tool, but will be supported by other local and national indices.
And I think there's a place for that, Mr. Chair. I think what we're really looking at is this would be that automatic adjustment that we use for just for the basis of allowing those costs to escalate. On the reporting side and on the discussion side, every year when we revisit these and consider all the factors, we would bring those other metrics to the table. But this is really just to say that the GDP versus any one of the CCIs or even the CPI would be our preferred standard. Again, for those reasons that we talked about before, it's mentioned in the statute. It's a metric that's utilized across other evaluations that relate directly to the plan. And it's the one that's kind of the smoothest out of our available suite of options.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Adam. I think myself, right, and others potentially, right, got comfortable with the GDP price deflator as the means for the automatic increases, as supplemented by review of other indices. And so I just want to make sure that you said there may be a place to capture that, when, we're all maybe not actively involved in this, right? 10 years from now, will that, be known to whomever is picking up the baton and carrying it? So I think that's just my input. And I see Paul has a hand up. Let me go to Paul and see if others have thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Carmine. So I agree. I think we need to have some type of a easy way to be able to follow this, and certainly the GDP is that easy way to follow this. But what I would prefer, and I think it's along those same lines as Carmine. Carmine, correct me if I'm wrong with you as well. If we took those basic elements that we use, the bulk of our construction materials, concrete, asphalt, oil, um, construction labor market, if we could take and have some type of a side calculation, and if that is rolling parallel with the GDP, everything's all fine and dandy. But if that spikes like it has, like the unfortunate thing that we've been experiencing for the past couple of years, that would prompt a special revision of that escalation. So I would use the extraneous or the exterior things as a bellwether to the GDP, and then reevaluate utilizing the GDP if those just go. I don't want to say south; they go north really quick. Thank you, Carmen.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and I think if we go back, I think Adam and team, at our last meeting, the presentation you gave showing the GDP price deflator being the automatic and then other sources being reviewed. And I think we had said twice a year, right, is where we landed. I think just capturing that, carrying that into the recommendation that is made to the RTA board, that it's the GDP price deflator will be the method for doing automatic updates, and that keeps us reasonably current, and there will be other sources that will be evaluated for potential greater adjustments as needed, depending on what's happening, those factors that Paul mentioned, and potentially others. So I just want to be clear that the recommendation from the committee is GDP price deflator for automatic increases plus other sources than for a more granular check and validating and potential adjusting. Jamie?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You touched on the frequency of reporting, and so just letting you know that is the 5th item. So we could get to that in sequence, but that is something that we'd like to discuss this morning as well. So
Yeah,
just
I think
letting
we
you know that's all of us.
I appreciate that. I think we can go in sequence. I think, and if any other committee member, has feedback, I think where we landed and the overall comfort amongst the group was that it was GDP price deflator plus others. And so as long as it's reflected that way and what's communicated to the board, I think you have the committee support. And if anybody feels otherwise, please share that insight now. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. So if staff can capture that and fashion it into the recommendation that goes forward, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely will do. All right. Moving on to the second. PAR allocation, annual assignment of PAR revenues to jurisdictions following the percentage outlined in the ballot, 75% to the city until the 55% share. We've got that baked into the language already. Really, our assessment here is that we just document the cumulative amount of PAR irrespective to costs. And the reason for that is because there are going to be some years in the early part of the plan where the costs aren't in complete full alignment with the revenues that we collect by design. We want to build up a little bit of a buffer so that when the construction phase rolls in, we have the cash to actually support that. Conversely, there will be a few years where the costs exceed the amount of revenues that are collected. And so really, this is just to say from a accounting standpoint, that we always recognize that there's a virtual account of that additional revenue over what was originally projected that we keep track of irrespective of those costs as they roll in, just because those two schedules aren't the same. We're hoping that this one would be a pretty easy one, but happy to have any conversation about that.
Any input or questions from committee members? Okay, not seeing any. I think then that signifies an agreement with the cumulative amounts, tracking of cumulative amounts, irrespective of cost.
All right. Thank you. Moving forward, PAR release. This is our recommendation regarding the programming of those PAR funds on projects. Our recommendation, at least for the start, is that we incorporate a 5-year rolling release, which is going to just allow us enough time to really understand the health and the viability of the early plan and, to see that revenues are flowing in, hopefully not to see any more construction spikes, anything like that. Just all the things that we need to know that we're on track. And then so the 20% part of it is basically because we're on a 5-year period, 20% would reflect 1 year, but rather than releasing just the first year that comes off of the top and then the second year and then the third year, if there was a time where we did go negative, using 20% instead just kind of smooths out that balance and allows for somewhat of a guarantee that there would be funds released every year. And so I suppose in the recommendation, really it's just that we do a rolling release. 5 years is our good idea. 20% matches along with the 5. If there was conversation about it being a 6 or a 4, we would need to adjust the percentage as well of that release.
Appreciate that, Adam. And I think it's reflective of the discussion we had at our last meeting. It lines up, nicely. You take the 20-year plan, you break it into 5-year increments. The 5-year increments, as far as balance release, are broken up evenly. I'd like to hear from the committee members any thoughts on this, and particularly I'd like to call on Sam. Sam wasn't on last time. His staff was, but let me give Sam a moment to maybe gather thoughts. I saw some other hands jump up, so let me go Bill Carroll, and then I'll go Paul Kiesler, and then Sam. Hope you would provide some input on this as well. Bill.
Sorry, I thought you were starting with Sam. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with it. I had in my mind before we really got into this conversation, I was thinking that we certainly wanted to hold back 3 or 4 years worth of built up funding on that and not be releasing it immediately. 5 years seems really conservative to me, and based on where we stand today, that's probably good. So I'm solid.
Thanks, Bill. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Carmine. If we have 4 periods, would we want to do 25%?
Oh gosh, sorry. This would be kicking in at year 6, but we're suggesting that we do a rolling 5-year, so that each year we would release 20%, and then at the end of that year we would see new revenues come in. We would evaluate what the difference is there, and then an additional 20% would release. And so we'd gain a year, we'd offer up the 20%. We'd gain another year, we'd offer up 20%. So after we start with year 6, it would be an annual process,
Oh, okay.
always releasing 20% of the most recent 5-year period.
Understand.
So we kind of just preserve a 5-year buffer moving forward. And then in the late stages of the plan, depending on how well or how close to original projections we are, we might make some adjustments or offer up that adjustments should probably be made in those last 5 years of the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, did you have any thoughts, Sam?
Thanks, Carmine. I think it makes sense. So basically you're collecting 5 years. Beginning year 6, you start releasing the funds. Do you ever catch up? What happens in the last 5 years? I think you were kind of touching on that, Adam.
Yeah, in the last 5 years, I think we would just have to adjust those percentages because there wouldn't be additional revenue collection. So I think you'd move to like a 25, 50, 75, 100% as you move to the end. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. We could write in a provision that we do a declining balance when we get to the last 5 years of the plan. I'm anticipating potentially, if things go really well, that there also might be appetite for shortening that rolling period. You know, if we're in year 12 of the plan and things are really rocking, potentially somebody would like to suggest that we move to a 4 and 25. Either way, when we get to the last 5 years, I think some sort of declining balance would solve that. And I'm happy to write that into the recommendation as well.
Thanks, Adam. And then I apologize if y'all talked about this last time, but I know there's additional revenue. So if it's doled out in 20% increments every year, but it's spread out across different categories of the plan, is it up to the jurisdiction to say, yeah, I want you to put that 20% here or there based on what things we have in the pipeline, or how is that going to be decided?
That's the next recommendation that we have. We really are presenting 2 options, which is full discretion of the jurisdictions they're awarded to, or some sort of priority system in place. I'm certain that there are some opinions on that. We just didn't have time to discuss that last week.
Okay, gotcha. I think it makes sense what you're proposing here. My only hesitation is, the 20%, if we're locked into that and there is more revenue available and we've got a project or something that needs, that we want to move up, that we'd like to tap into that funding. I don't know what if there's like an asterisk somewhere that could be, it could be increased, with board approval or something like that. That's my only like gut reaction to that proposal. Otherwise, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I think Adam and team, we have language elsewhere that allows for evaluation and adjustment with recommendations by CART and TMC, right? So the board has the authority to go ahead and make adjustments as necessary with recommendations from CART and TMC. And so maybe capturing some of that language along with this, last period closeout accounts for the need or the potential for some adjustment based on conditions as felt appropriate by the RTA board. Paul.
So Carmine, sorry, Chair, what happens towards the end of the program if we have a large cash reserve? We're ending this program with a large cash reserve because we haven't accomplished a bunch of the projects, and that's the situational reality there. But what if we do get the projects done, yet we still have a large cash reserve at the end? Is that something we need to consider?
Dan.
Oh, I see Mike's hand is up. I'm going to let him go first.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Carmine, good morning. I was hoping I'd hear you go, Dan. I wanted to hear what you'd have to say about that.
Happy to, sir.
So Paul, great question. Here's the way that I see this unfolding, and I think it kind of goes back to the whole conversation around potential additional revenue, cash balances, the whole bit. Because we're having this conversation on a regular basis, I plan that we will have updates to the board quarterly. I know that we will make a formal annual report, if you will, and we'll be talking through that. But here's the way I'm seeing it work. If we're projecting out the full 20 years, and basically what I'm thinking is that we would project through the end of the program every time we give an update. And so we'll know long before the end of the program that we're going to have a cash balance or that we're going to be short. Okay. And either one of those may require either we'll call it a deliberate board action up to and maybe even including going back to the voter as long as we do that before the last 2 years of the plan. So I'm not concerned about. I wouldn't spend too much time with scenarios like that, only because I think we can just put a little blurb in there that says, hey, if this happens, then we're going to go back to the board and get some guidance on either going back to the voter or whatever other opportunities there are within the plan language to beef up areas. So that's the way I'm really approaching this. Is that we'll call it quarterly update, but really that annual review will be the key to identifying what that looks like going forward. Thank you.
Paul, did you have any follow-up on that or? Okay. And Dan, did you?
I think,
oh,
yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a good approach that we stay on top of it and we know where we are as we go. And that we don't, I mean, for the taxpayers, we don't end up with a balance unless we are indeed facing more projects needing to be done. I'll coin the term right now, RTA subsequent starts forming in 20 years. So everything is fluid, but as long as we're staying on top of it, then we'll know what we're doing.
Very good. Okay. Adam, staff, do you have what you need on that item, number 3?
I think we do. I think we do. Thanks, Carmine.
Okay.
All right, moving on to number 4. This is what Sam was alluding to, and we just mentioned. The recommendations come down to, would you all prefer to recommend that we just address these PAR needs consistent with PAR allocation release policies without designating priorities? Or do we think it's really important to establish priorities even in the first period? We've got a lot of flexibility on this, and we thought this would be a great topic of conversation for the day.
Appreciate that, Adam. I think we talked about both items, and there was some feelings initially that we have a prioritization, but also we allow a process to alter from that. But happy to open this anew to anybody who has input, and maybe go to Sam since you had that question. Sam, if you've got thoughts or preferences on which of these 2 options or a combination.
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. I mean, it's so hard to predict what the needs are of the future in 5, 10, 15 years. And so, I tend to lean toward the flexibility, just because that that would probably give the best opportunity to make sure that if there's, you know, a release in additional revenue, we've got a place to spend it. You know, it might be we've got roads ready that need to be paved as part of the pavement category, or it might be something else. So that's what my gut's telling me right now, and I lean towards that.
Like to hear from, you know, each jurisdiction on this, to get a sense as to whether we have a consensus view of it, or if we need to dive into maybe an altered structure.
This is Nathan Barrett with the town of Sahuarita. My only comment is that RTA subsequent should be called R3A.
Appreciate that, Nathan. We'll put that in the pool for naming. Fausto.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe a combination of both. And apologies, my internet looks like it might be a little unstable. I think we do need to have some hierarchy in regards to paying down the debt service and maybe some other elements being first. But again, I think kind of beyond the three mentioned, maybe it goes, or that's the hierarchy. So that's my opinion.
Paul.
Contingency. I'd like to see, you know, I like to see some rainy day funding in there.
Jason, do you have any input from your perspective?
Yeah, I think paying down, like someone had mentioned, paying down the debt. Yeah, I think that'd be a priority. And then obviously contingency is a big issue too, as far as being able to complete projects. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. I tend to agree that it's a long plan, and having flexibility is important to meet whatever the emerging need is at any given point in time. Trying to channel a little bit what I think our board, the RTA board, would like to see with this. And so, you know, from that perspective, I feel like having a structure, right, a hierarchy, prioritization makes sense. But I don't want to unnecessarily burden trying to speculate what the board is seeking here. I'd appreciate, you know, maybe Mike, if you've had any conversations, or if there have been conversations during, you know, the board meeting that I'm not recalling offhand right now. I mean, what's your gut here? What do you think is what the board is interested in seeing happen with this prioritization?
Well, we haven't really gotten into detail about that. What I did suggest, and you're talking specifically about the potential additional revenue prioritization.
Correct.
Yeah. So what I had suggested to them to consider is shoring up that debt service component first, for all the reasons that you've heard me articulate. And I think that's just a good way of preparing ourselves as a region in case that we want to move some projects forward. That's the sum total of it. However, I'm not married to that. They really didn't give me any feedback on that other than okay. Now, as I've mentioned before, I don't know that we have to, you know, hammer all this out right this second. I think we need to make sure, though, that there is an understanding amongst the jurisdictional partners that this is something that we may have to deal with and address. Now, quite frankly, because of the potential 5-year rolling average, I don't know that we have to hammer all of that out right this minute, because that won't necessarily be a factor until that 6th year. And so we've got a little time to really see how this shakes out and how it works. I think a general framework would probably be of value, just in terms of what we're thinking. And I think Sam mentioned in his comments that it's really hard to identify today what we're going to need, down the road. And I think that probably is across the board.
Mhm.
As you've heard me mention before, Carmine, I think that the highest risk area is probably roadway, just roadway project because of the construction cost. My gut, though, is that a second is probably transit because of labor costs, depending on what happens with the labor costs. That could also be a risk that we need to make sure we're prepared for.
Appreciate that, Mike.
You're welcome.
Fausto?
So how about a general framework of debt service and then perhaps a contingency up to a given percentage, and then leave it open from that point to allow agencies to figure out where they'd like.
Okay, appreciate that suggestion, Fausto. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. So if we're only talking about a 20% distribution of the 5-year rolling total, I mean, how much money are we talking? And so if we're parsing it out to these different categories, are we just not moving very big amounts around? I don't have a sense of scale.
Got some sense. Sorry, I'll get to the right slide here. So we ran up one scenario that just utilized what our projections were on that 2026 ballot, and then just some example revenues that kind of correlated closer to that 2024 report for the baseline figures that we had come in. And so in any particular period, sorry, we'll go to the next slide. So this is a potential example of what it could look like as that par accumulated across the first 5 years. I tried to build in a scenario where we went negative just so we could understand what that might also look like.
So that first year in this scenario, Adam, it would be 4.3 million.
For the Tucson share, yep.
Okay.
That would be this would reflect year 6, where we took that 5-year, and then that was the 20% available.
Got it. And so then of that 4.4 million, are we suggesting a portion of that has to go into debt service first? Or this is after the debt service is taken out?
At this point, this would be prior to any distribution for anything other than making cost adjustments related to the GDP price deflator. So yeah, this would be the totals that were identified for City of Tucson and the rest of the jurisdictions, but with no prioritization or distribution beyond that.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just trying to understand how, what it is we're proposing is going to work in practice when we talk about, prioritizing where the money's parked.
I think that's the crux of it. I appreciate, you pushing us into more of the details. And I think to Mike's point, it's not something that necessarily has to be set now, although I don't think we should kick it too far down the road. I would believe that the RTA board and in particular, certain jurisdictional representatives are going to have an interest in getting this finalized sooner rather than later. And so from that perspective, I think another option could be to put both options in front of the RTA board and say that, we're still discussing this item, and that there are 2 options that have been logged so far, with the ability to maybe combine them in some way, and then see what discussion ensues and what feedback they have. And I think, you could, as Fausto suggested, you could change option number 2 to say debt service, one debt service, 2 contingency, and then 3 would be all other elements. And then say to the board, here's where we are. What's your feedback? That could be a strategy or an approach. Mike, I see your hands up.
Yeah, a couple things. And I appreciate the conversation, and I know we're trying to really delve into details for the future. If you look at the total dollars for the debt service is 30 million is what we've built into the plan. Okay. And I'm talking about the potential additional revenue, right? That par amount. So it is, we're not talking huge dollars there. And in Adam's presentation, you can see we're not really talking about huge dollars there either. In thinking about it and kind of hearing the conversation, so we leave ourselves maximum flexibility, but still have at least a framework. What you could consider is just say that the TMC will meet on an annual basis and determine what those priorities are. Because keep in mind, the dollars aren't like free money that can be used for anything. The dollars are already designated in those elements. And the conversation really is, which element are those dollars allocated to? So it's almost kind of simple, from that perspective. And if we'll use some examples, let's say that the city of Tucson is needing additional cash for a project in a roadway element piece. Well, then that could be a conversation that happens with the TMC. But if Oro Valley has a safety project, under the safety ADA and active transportation that's short, that could be a conversation to shore that up. And so I think we probably are overthinking a little bit, and maybe we just try to identify just a general framework and then just say on an annual basis, we're going to revisit that and make sure that we have a game plan that everyone's comfortable with. And that recommendation could be made to the RTA board. Or we could leave it in the admin code that decision rests with the TMC at the time. I mean, you could do that you could codify that way if you'd like. Anyway, just a couple thoughts to consider.
Paul?
I guess I may, and I think I agree with Mike here, because I think I have a misunderstanding with regard to that 75-25 split up to 55%. That money isn't given, that money is kind of a reserve or a contingency, right? Based upon its distribution to either City of Tucson or everybody else. So it's not exactly money that we just hand over to a jurisdiction or money we just hand over to the City of Tucson, correct?
Hey, Carmine, maybe I can help with that. So Paul, so the spirit and intent of that potential additional revenue is to provide capacity in the plan for exactly that potential additional revenue. Okay.
Okay.
The agreement basically within the plan is that the city's goal that is supported by the board is to get them to 55% of the total, if you will, ultimately the share, right? And so the idea is that potential additional revenue, that proportion, that share that goes to the city will in fact accomplish that. But those additional dollars are still restricted within the plan.
Okay.
Now, the chemistry and where within the plan they're allocated, if you will, in terms of the elements, because all of the elements have a component of potential additional revenue. And if you remember when we were talking about this, the amounts were based on what we at the time identified as risk. And that's why the roadway element has such a big component of that. It's a much bigger number, if you will. It wasn't let's spread it across like, peanut butter, spread it across the board. It was really, more targeted than that. And so it isn't just free money. I mean, it really has to go to the plan and the plan elements. And I think that can be, and I think it should be flexible based on the needs of the jurisdictional partners, but based on everybody's needs as a whole, the region. So it isn't just here's a check, have fun. It really is more defined than that.
Okay. And it's not for, let me call it scope creep. If we have a defined project, it should be going so to bolster the plan for the project for the defined scope, not for adding additional elements to each project. Correct?
That's correct. So, let's make sure we're clear there. The intent here is for the plan. This is for completion of the plan.
Okay.
And the dollars that go along with that, right? So when you talk about scope creep, you're talking specifically about the roadway element.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of flexibility in the pavement rehabilitation. There's a lot of flexibility in the safety, ADA, and active transportation. Okay. So those are not defined scopes in terms of projects.
Sure.
And so the spirit and intent, and that's why, if you recall, the roadway element, which has the highest risk, has the biggest PAR, if I recall correctly. But then the pavement rehabilitation has a pretty big one as well, again, to provide you all with flexibility there. And so that way you don't have to worry about, scope creep or the other comments that you made.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mike. That's helpful. I go Sam and then John Bernal after that.
Great, thanks so much. I appreciate the conversation. I was just looking through the plan right now, and as I think more about it, Carmine, I don't know that we would support option 2. I think option 1 would be the preference, and Mike hit the nail on the head. I think that our biggest need is going to be in the arterial and collector road pavement rehab area, and so I can expect, if I'm still around in 5 years, that I would say, hey, let's put that money immediately to some of these road projects that we've been, anticipating we'd get going. So road rehab projects. So that's because I just don't know that the need for debt service is the same for all jurisdictions. In fact, we don't even know if we're going to need to take bonds to do some of these projects early in the plan. So I just wanted to make my position clear on this. I'm in support of option 1. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Sam. John?
Thank you, Carmine. I think it's great that I went right after Sam, because that's where I was headed. That I think if we get too specific about a distribution within elements, we're forgetting that ultimately the starting point is getting the city as close as possible to 55% of the total revenues. So I think that's key to any of this conversation. The city has to have that ability to say, yes, I'm going to garner the share that I was expecting from the PAR. So that's my only point. I think I'm saying, yeah, option 1 is better.
Got that. Let me go Bill Carroll, and then I'll come back to you, Adam.
I'm just following up. I tend to agree. I like option 1 better. I don't know that there's a problem with presenting both options to the board, because I think the board can do whatever they want to do. But if we're offering our opinion, I would agree that option 1 seems to be the most flexible, the best opportunity for everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Adam, maybe before you speak, here's a novel idea, and I don't know if it helps or complicates things more. It could be that on the city 75%, right? That's going to the city. And so for them to be able to choose, how to apply that makes a lot of sense, right? Given everything that everybody has said. The stuff that's coming to the region, right? We've got multiple jurisdictions that would be beneficiaries of that PAR, that 25% that comes to the region, and maybe putting some guidelines in place, not that they're hard it's not that it's a hard default, but that there's some look at things in a certain order. So I just toss that out there. I don't want to add to the confusion, but it sounds like, there's a lot of support and desire, at least as it relates to the city, to get them to 55% and allow them to apply that where they feel the greatest need is. And then, others who have said, we favor debt service and contingency are coming from the non-city jurisdictions, and maybe that's an idea. But let me go to Adam. I see Jamie's hands come up. Go back to Adam, and then we'll go to Jamie and back to Paul.
Thank you, Carmine. I just wanted to make a mention. A couple of people have mentioned contingency at this point, and I just want to kind of remind everybody that the idea behind creating that rolling 5-year period in effect creates a contingency. Because if we think, what is the purpose of a contingency? If we see unanticipated cost increases within the scope of the plan, not allowing for scope creep, things like that, then there's a reserve of money that can be utilized to address those cost overruns. And I think that's exactly what the rolling PAR ultimately is there to do, with conversation and agreement, when these situations present themselves. So I would probably recommend that, because PAR serves as a contingency, if option 2 needed to be floated, that it looked more like this, where it's just, debt service is a priority and then potentially other elements based on need. That's just my suggestion. That's not a PAG thing. That's just an Adam thing.
Thanks, Adam. Let me disrupt what I said. Let me go to Mike, and then I'll go back to Jamie and Paul.
Thank you, Carmine. Adam, when you speak, you are speaking for PAG. Okay, just keep that in mind.
You got it, Mike. You got it.
And I'm good with it, by the way. So, one thing I wanted to just put a bug in your ear about, those of you who've been sitting around the table for a few years, remember that I actually pushed back pretty hard on debt service early on when we were talking about it. And I am not a proponent of going after any kind of debt. So I want you to know that. What I was really thinking about is that if our cash flow, if we're able to perform the way we do, or the way we're projecting and hoping, we're going to probably need some debt service or some debt in about the 6th to 8th year, in that ballpark. So if you think of it simplistically, if you go after option 1, which I'm supportive of, you actually are leaving yourself that opportunity, because if you use the rolling average, you're going to have some money in the bank. And even though, the 5-year, you're releasing that basically the first year, the average of that 5 years, right? That 20%, you're still going to have money in the bank. And so you as a team and the board can make a call, make a decision in that 6th, 7th, or 8th year, whether you want a bond, and you'll have some capacity to do that. So you don't have to worry about, the priority of, that I had suggested in terms of, shore up that debt service first, because all I'm trying to do is build you some flexibility so that if we do run short on cash, we know we've got a good cash flow in the entirety of for the entirety of the program. But if we need to infuse some cash early on, you'll have the opportunity to do that. So I think that option 1 can get you to that space without really even calling it that, because it'll be in your hip pocket. That's all, Carmine. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I was going to comment too on debt service and why that was listed as a high priority in case we do run into cash flow issues, but completely agree with what Mike is suggesting in terms of having those annual outlooks in terms of how we're doing with cash, and we can make adjustments on an annual basis. But also, I wonder if it's worth acknowledging or discussing how, if debt service is prioritized for PAR, how that will be credited in terms of that allocation. Because unlike the other elements where there are specific projects by jurisdiction, my understanding is debt service is sort of helping the whole plan. So I don't know if that deserves any recognition if it comes up as a priority in the coming weeks, if we just need to make sure we're on the same page with how that would be credited in terms of that distribution 75-25.
Appreciate that, Jamie.
And I would think that maybe it wouldn't count towards any allocation, but I just wondered if that needs to be acknowledged or discussed.
Paul?
Well, a couple things. One, I'm hoping that we have very minimal debt service because we're starting off with a very high balance. I mean, debt service to me would seem more of an appropriate conversation if this was the beginning of RTA 1, where you didn't have a lot of cash buildup and you needed to get the program rolling. So you're going to need debt service just to start projects. But we're already got a huge amount of cash that we're rolling into this to finish up those RTA 1 projects. So I'm not as concerned on that. But what I could find myself supporting option 1 if we used kind of option 2 as you do with any code. You create an intent and purpose. And if there's some type of guidance, so that there is something to frame the conversation, that it's not just open to anything, but there's not hard rails, but there's guidance, and I think that's what would make me a lot more comfortable supporting option 1. Thank you.
So, Mike?
I want to clarify one thing, Paul. We are sitting on cash. However, that is all for the completion of RTA 1. And when you do the cash flow analysis for RTA Next, irrespective of RTA 1, we're gonna put, if we perform, if we're able to deliver the schedule, if you will, that we've got out there, we're going to be short of cash in about that 6th or 7th year. So I realize, I understand what you're saying. I'm absolutely clear. You're right. But for the RTA Next component, if in fact we deliver as a team the way we're outlining and hoping and projecting and, almost praying, then we could be short. And again, I'm not arguing. I just want to make sure you understand the basis for that, okay?
Yeah.
Which we've incorporated that cash we have in the bank. That's all.
And I do understand that it is indeed already allocated, but the best laid plans of mice and men end up where we are today. So I get that.
Fausto?
Yeah, so going back to the discussion so far, I think what Adam had suggested, we can remove the contingency from option 2 and just leave it with that being the first.
Thanks. Dan?
So with that, Mr. Chair, really great discussion. To try to wrap this one up, perhaps we could offer the board, as you mentioned, Carmine, both options. And regardless of what option is selected, that we would add on what Mike had suggested about going through the committee and board process on an annual basis after that 5th year to prioritize that par distribution.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think folks are sort of converging on a single option. So maybe, as is noted in that last bullet, right, pairing some of the option 2 language with the option 1, and then inserting the aspects of how the committee and board process fits in with this, because I think as important as what's being done or how it's being done, it's who has the authority to do whatever it is in the end. And so I think those elements are saying, hey, you're going to have flexibility. It has some suggested guidance that's simply that, right? It's a suggested guidance, and then who has what role in terms of the final determinations. Those seem to me to be the elements, and if we can get that assembled into a single option, then we don't have to say to the board, you choose, but we can put forward a solid recommendation that then they can provide feedback on. Is everybody on the committee reasonably comfortable with that approach, trying to pare it down to a single PAR option that includes elements of the discussion we've had thus far?
That works for me, Carmine.
Works for me.
I'm good with it.
Super. Thanks for that conversation, and I think that moves us closer to having something that brings clarity to what we think should be done.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add just one final thing, I think it would also be good for us to just reemphasize the share as part of this discussion, so it's all packaged in one place, just so it's not confusing. So perhaps we could add that in as well, with the 75% share up to 55%.
I think that makes sense. Thanks, Dan. All right, so we move on to item number 5 then, frequency of reporting on plan health.
All right. We had heard a lot of different discussions, so I think this is structured as a recommendation where we provide a very comprehensive annual review, and then either on demand or as needed, we could provide more frequent updates, semi-annually or quarterly. We were trying to be respectful of the fact that some folks were wanting, we always want transparency and to keep up to date, but at the same time, I think there was a sensitivity to just being in meetings to death. And potentially the administrative burden on PAG staff as well. I'll selfishly add that to the mix. If it serves a purpose, we are ready to go. But if it's numbers for the sake of numbers without action, then we would prefer to restrict that to an annual exercise and then on demand.
Understand. Sam's hand went up quickly there, so let's go, Sam.
I'm coming to help Adam out.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam.
I agree. I think annual makes sense, and it's probably when the budget is submitted to the RTA board. It's, here's the upcoming year's budget, and along with that is here are the health of the plan. So I think that totally makes sense. I don't know that semi-annual or quarterly is going to do anything, especially if we're talking about not seeing any distribution for PAR in year 6. It's really just to keep our fingers on the pulse on an annual basis. So that's my recommendation.
Any others have thoughts? I mean, I was the one who suggested a greater frequency, but I, have been better educated through the conversation that's taken place last meeting and again today. And so I'm not wedded to doing it. I appreciate the suggestion of not creating a cadence that produces work but doesn't have corresponding value. So I'm willing to go along with whatever the greater consensus is. So is everyone, Jason?
Should we designate a date for this annual report?
Yeah, I think Sam's suggestion of coinciding it with the budget, makes sense. And then if you back up from there, right, as the budget's being prepared, it makes its way through various committees for review. I think that it would be extremely helpful that the committees that are participating in budget setting activities have the benefit of that report. In other words, so they're not asked to review something and provide recommendations prior to the report being produced. And then the board has the benefit of the report, but the committees that provided input don't have it. So I think backing it up in such a way where it's tied to budget setting and it's available at the earliest stage when any of the committees then are beginning their consideration and providing feedback on the budget. I don't know, Jamie or Dan, I didn't see whose hand went up first, so I'll defer to.
Go ahead,
either.
Jamie. I'll follow you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're actually thinking internally about a lot of this. So, when is the fiscal year going to start? If revenue collection starts April 1, we also have in statute requirements for annual reporting in January. Obviously, the budget process usually has occurred in sort of the May timeframe. So, fully supportive of whatever's recommended, but we're working through some issues to identify when we're going to have that information available. The January reporting does coincide well with the annual financial audit that occurs in the fall for the previous fiscal year. So that's just one piece of information, and when we get that. So some of this might be driven by when the data are available, I guess is my point. So if we don't have to lock it in right now, that would be maybe my preference, but defer to the committee. Thanks.
And Mr. Chair, to follow that, I would agree with Jamie that I would prefer flexibility here, because we also want to consider the tip cycle and making sure that we could use this information to inform the tip development or amendment development process, so that it would be a fluid process, and we wouldn't be waiting multiple months if we locked in a particular date that didn't align with that process. So as a consideration, I think flexibility would be preferred, just so that we could be nimble and ensure that we're, as an organization, accommodating that information swiftly.
Dan, and can I just get clarification on that last point about flexibility? Is it flexibility to have time to figure out where it best coincides, or would it be floating flexibility so that on an annual basis it might not land with the same in the same time period?
So rather than locking in a particular date, I would just suggest maybe leaving it more the language as it is, annual, to make sure we do that, and more frequently as needed. But with that, once we provide that report, whenever that is, and we realize that we need to make some adjustments, we can incorporate that and the committee and board recommendations into our tip and tip amendment process. So rather than trying to lock in a date and work around that, we want to make sure that we're swiftly adjusting the tip based on the committee and board decisions based off that information, is what I'm suggesting.
Okay. Let me query, committee members and particularly those who serve on the committees that are active in preparation of the tip. By the time things get to TMC, right, we're pretty far along in the process, and so I don't have insight into the discussions and the details that would be beneficial, right, at some of the prior committee stages. So I think we've got other members. I know Catherine and Sam are on the TPC. Paul maybe or might have a different representative on there, but I'd like to hear from some folks who actually participate in these processes to see if what Dan suggested. I think we want to give staff the flexibility. I think also, though, we have struggled a little bit by not fully utilizing the expertise and experience of folks on our committees, and so I'd love to hear, Catherine, your thoughts, and Sam, from a committee perspective as to what timing would be helpful to see this information.
I can go first. I think these things all one leads into another. It's hard to give a precise recommendation. I think kind of starting to create a flow chart of all these documents we're talking about and how one feeds into the other is going to be the most helpful in figuring out how to achieve it, and perhaps whether we need to activate some of the committees that haven't been active lately. That one time there was a PAG finance committee. Maybe this PAR, in-depth discussion of all the cost indices and the GDP and funding availability and outlook. is really well suited for that group. That used to feed into then call for projects, which you do need to really understand what revenues we're talking about and the financial health and all of that TIP would look at, or maybe it's TPC and feeding up. So I want to make all of these reports that we do useful and actionable and not just documents to sit on a shelf. And so, like I said, I don't know cleanly what that looks like yet, because I think we're still in the discussion point. But as we flush out all of the steps, then we align them with the appropriate committees and what that looks like on a calendar to make sure we're doing this efficiently and effectively.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. And I think that lines up sort of what Dan was saying, is, hey, let us have, some flexibility to figure that out. And that's why I was asking for clarification. Is it flexibility to figure out how it best lays out, or is it flexibility that we may vary it, right, from year to year? And I'm not necessarily a fan of the latter. I'm very supportive of the former and saying, hey, give us an opportunity to see how these things line up end to end and make the most beneficial use of the information in the processes that are happening. So appreciate that, Catherine. And Sam, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you have anything else to offer, and anyone else, please, that participates on the TIP subcommittee or TPC or, any other for that matter. I'd love to hear some final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. I just want to say that my suggestion to align it with the annual budget is not a hard one. And I think based on the feedback from PAG staff and comments from Catherine, something that makes sense, but that is consistent and the expectations are clear, I think it would be the most thing. But I'm not wed to any specific time frame. I just felt like the cadence of annual reporting is an important one. That's it.
Okay, super. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to confirm, it was the former. I just want to ensure that whatever schedule we adopt is something that works and feeds into the processes that we have in place. That way we're not presenting something, waiting for multiple months to be able to react to that and having projects delayed based on that. So that was all. Definitely, this isn't something that would be a schedule that fluctuates from year to year as far as the reporting. We just want to make sure that we consider our processes and identifying the date for that. And I agree with Catherine. I think a flow chart with all this would be very helpful, and we could work on that. Okay.
Awesome. So I think then, having staff continue to lay out what process and sequencing would be, and vetting that with, the committees that we mentioned, right? TIP, TIP subcommittee, right? TPC, right? I think that makes good sense. So I think with that, you've got feedback that it'd be annually, and that we develop a cadence on how that would occur on an annual basis.
Yes, sir. We have that captured.
All right.
All right.
Good.
And
go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say these were the 5 recommendations, and I believe that we've got consensus on all 5. So that's all we had for you today from our side.
Well, good. And only 10 minutes outside of the window allotted for it. That's pretty good. A lot of good discussion. So thanks to everyone. All right, Dan, we'll come back to you then on item number 3 on the agenda, oversight, delivery, and transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. We did not have many comments on the oversight, accountability, and transparency section. Just want to make sure everyone can see my screen.
We can see it. Can you increase
Yes.
the size a bit? It'd be great.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Okay, so with that, this is the track change version with staff comments included here in blue and red. And the only 2 comments that we received from Catherine, I agree with both of them, so happy to accommodate those. What I did, Catherine, was just adjust the heading per your comment here, the comment was these two bullets used to exist under a different heading. They don't make sense as listed here, which you're right on. So with that, I added this section heading here to flow with the prior section.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. If there are no other concerns with that, I can move on to the next comment, Mr. Chair.
Please do.
Just a moment. Okay, and then similarly, Catherine had identified that the statement at the beginning of this paragraph related to TMC membership was not necessary with the other revisions, and so I agreed with that and removed it to accommodate. So if Catherine, if you want to take a look to review that, and if that's acceptable by you and the others, that would really wrap up this item, unless there are any other comments.
That works for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And Mr. Chair, those were the comments we received. If anyone needs
Jason, real quick.
Yes.
Instead of native tribes, put native nations, please.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure that's consistent throughout the document, Jason.
Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else have any feedback for the team on this updated draft? I'm not seeing any hands go up, Dan, so I think that we are okay.
Okay, well, thank you all for that review. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And a clean version was sent out, but I'll resend the cleaner version based on that additional comment there.
Okay. Okay. We can move on then to item number 4, review of RTA administrative code and policies, objectives, and procedures.
All right. With that, Mr. Chair, we only had one final comment to resolve. Let me go ahead and pull that up in just a moment here. I'll pull up both the Word document and the matrix. Okay. There. And can you confirm that you can see my screen, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so with that, we had discussed that following the past resolution from staff on the utility eligibility, staff had a discussion and a real example and had revised that. We had discussed that in our last meeting and came back and revised that eligibility as shown here. And whoops, just zooming in a little bit there. So with that, the revised eligibility, utility relocations where required by law, prior rights, final utility adjustments to match finished grade, e.g. manhole adjustments, reconstructs, valve adjustments, etc., and house connection sewers or business connection sewers if impacted because of an RTA project. Note, for eligibility purposes, utilities include but are not limited to water, sewer, electrical, gas, and telecommunications, including fiber optic lines. I'll open that up for questions, comments.
Dan, maybe before we ask for input, can you show us how 17G will fit into the overall document? So, right, it's referring to utility adjustments. What's the context of?
This is part of the eligibility section. So let me scroll up to the top here. So
Okay.
part of our policies, this was one of many items for reimbursement eligibility.
Okay, so this is calling out those items that are eligible for reimbursement.
Yes.
And so therefore it's those utility relocations required by prior rights, final utility adjustments matching finished grade, and house connection, sewer and business connection sewers, if impacted because of an RTA project, are eligible. And then we're saying that the eligible purposes or eligible utilities are water, sewer, electric, gas, and telecommunications.
Correct.
Okay. Any feedback on that? It reads clearly to me. Any clarity or practical implications that anybody wants to address or raise? Okay. Does not look like it, Dan. So I think we're good with that language. Can move that into consensus reached.
Will do. Okay. With that, Mr. Chair, that was the last of the comments that we needed to discuss for resolution. As mentioned, I did send out that Word document, and with that, each of the track changes that you see in there are accompanied by a little bubble comment which references the matrix for confirmation. So with that, if anyone so desires, we feel pretty confident that all those comments have been addressed. But if anyone would like to look at that and confirm, validate, if we missed anything, we'd be happy to correct that. But at this point, Mr. Chair, we're with the additional inclusions of the 5 financial components this morning, and that last consensus piece for the utilities, we feel that the POPs section of the administrative code has now reached consensus on all fronts.
That's an amazing feat. Thank you, Dan. And I just wanted to ask, is there a time period in which you'd like any final comments, end of week or by Monday, or?
That would be great. We are going to be presenting an overview of everything to the TMC, and we'll of course attach everything that we've done November 12th, and then subsequently to the board on December 4th. So if anyone wants to take a final look, just make sure that we addressed everything appropriately per the consensus items in the matrix. If 1 week works for everyone, that would work with our schedule as well.
Okay, so by November 5th?
Yes. With that, Mr. Chair, we don't have an additional meeting scheduled. We could talk about that on the last item. But if the committee is comfortable with making a recommendation to the TMC and board at this time for the POPs, pending any errors that need to be corrected through that final review, you at your discretion, Mr. Chair, we could seek some sort of motion to that effect at this time, or we can reserve that for later at your discretion.
No, I think since we're convened today and we don't intend to meet again next week, which I'm sure nobody is too sad about, I would say let's entertain a motion for the committee to recommend the updated administrative code policies, objectives, and procedures.
So moved.
Okay, I have a
Second.
motion for a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. So Sam motion, Bill second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, you've got unanimous approval, Dan. Thanks, team and committee. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr.
Mike?
Chair.
Mike, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Carmine. First of all, I wanted to say thanks to everybody for the energy and effort you all put forth to get this across the finish line, at least the next step. When we first started talking about this a few weeks ago or several weeks ago, and I had suggested we needed to get this done by the end of the month of this month, it seemed like an insurmountable task, but you all got to it, and I'm really pleased. So thank you for that. As Dan mentioned, what I'd like to do is take this now to the TMC on the 12th and have them consider it potentially for recommendation to the board on December 4th. Carmine, would you like us to carve out some time for you to make that presentation on the 12th, or the staff can do it? I know you're going to be there. Generally, you attend those meetings as well. So I leave that out to you. You don't have to answer that now, but just let us know what your preference is there. And then potentially similar presentation to the board on the 4th. I think that it encapsulates all of the issues and concerns that were raised over the last several months. And I'm very pleased to report that to the board. I think it's a good document. The last thing I'll leave you with is when we would implement this. And I'll think about that a little bit. There are pieces in this that I think we should implement immediately and not wait necessarily for RTA Next, particularly because we do have several RTA 1 projects where we could start that process now. And so what I will probably look at is something around January 1 as the implementation date. So haven't made that final call yet in terms of recommendation of the board, but that's where I'm headed at this point. Thank you, Carmine. Appreciate it. Thanks, team. Appreciate it. And also, obviously, I didn't say it, but my team, pretty amazing. PEG and RTA team did an incredible amount of work on this. So thank you all for that. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike, for that update and feedback. And again, I'm equally as appreciative of the team for the work that was done, the clarity with which you brought forward information, made recommendations to us, listened to the discussion and the feedback from committee members and incorporated it. And so the overall structure of this was very well organized, helped us to stay focused, to step through some complex topics and to put forward what we believe is a solid recommendation. So thanks for that. And thanks committee members for devoting the time that you have to this effort and recognizing the importance. I think all of your insight and experience from the current RTA has been tremendously valuable in informing this next round of a program. So thank you for that as well. So it looks like then we're on to item number 5 on the agenda. That's RTA Next funding jurisdictional breakdowns. So I'll turn that back to staff. Looks like Dan and Rick Ellis will lead that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just wanted to echo what you and Mike said. Really appreciate everyone's time and effort on this. It's been a huge undertaking, so thank you. With that, these last 2 items, we really just wanted to get some feedback on the preferences related to where we include the jurisdictional breakdown. There were past discussions of potentially embedding this within the project descriptions. What we're proposing is actually to include it as an appendix, a table appendix, and I could share the table real quick if it's helpful.
That'd be great.
There we go. Can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yep, just came up.
Okay. So this is the jurisdictional breakdown, and what we did to add some clarification, particularly to the roadway element, was we included the full amount of the roadway element as shown in the RTA Next plan as approved by the board. And then we took out the RTA 1 completion and also the Sonoran Corridor project, since it goes through multiple jurisdictions and has a regional benefit from that equation. And with that, when you subtract that out, this is what you're looking at. And here's the breakdown of the projects listed for RTA Next in the roadway by jurisdiction. And the same we have listed here for the other elements, the safety element, the pavement element, and the transit elements, and the totals here. And with that, you could see in blue, the total jurisdictional share of the RTA Next plan by jurisdiction. And this down at the bottom is just a little disclaimer with the unallocated funding. So some of it's redundant at the top, but just for clarification, again, the jurisdictional breakdown does not include RTA 1, Snoring Corridor, the environmental element, since it's listed as a program and does not identify projects yet, as well as debt service, administration, and small business element. And so when you combine that unallocated total with the allocated total, it matches up 100% with the total project budget, and as do the jurisdictional breakdowns. So that's what we have there. And again, our recommendation is to include that in the appendix, but we could consider other places as well, based on some feedback. So I'll turn that back, Mr. Chair, for any questions, comments with this item.
Any comments or questions from the committee members? Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. I'll go first since I think I was the one that asked for this. I appreciate the staff putting this together. I think it makes sense to put it in the appendix. I'll just note I have other questions in terms of particularly safety and transit, how those dollars are broken out, but we can talk about that later and offline. I know Mike and the RTA staff, we've been engaging in some conversation, particularly about transit. But I think this makes sense to be placed in the appendix, so I support that recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Paul?
I'm torn on this because this is really kind of a floating situation as far as the allocation of the funding. I mean, there's a request on today's board meeting for another $55 million to go to RTA 1 projects. And since RTA 1 and RTA Next are kind of tied together now, would we be putting in something that is already obsolete? So if that gets passed today, that changes some of these numbers. And should we just be putting in, kind of maybe some percentages rounded to the nearest percentage as kind of the guidance for this, rather than putting in the detail of the numbers? I guess is where I'm kind of landing on this.
Appreciate that, Paul. I saw Mike's hand go up, so I think he might have some feedback.
Yeah, just a response. I think, Adam, or somebody highlighted on the screen there, RTA 1 completion, that is actually separated out. So what you see in terms of all of the RTA 1 projects, those are not part of the calculation. And that was direction from the board 2 years ago or longer, whereby those all calculations would exclude that RTA 1 completion. So as you see things come through, that shouldn't affect these percentages at all. It won't. Thank you.
That help, Paul?
That helps a bit, but I was just using that as an example. This will fluctuate as far as these, to the nearest $100 on some of this. I'm just wondering how worthwhile that is, unless we're using it as a historical marker, then I could be behind it.
So I think if it's noted that this is a snapshot in time and there will be changes that occur given activities that take place or shifts that might occur, that could be one way of addressing that, Paul. I saw, Dan, did you have a further response to that? Let me go to Dan and then I'll come back to Catherine and then John Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that's, we could do that, Mr. Chair. We could certainly put a note that this is a snapshot, but we also want to make sure that we hold true to the known projects, and that's what this captures. This fully captures all the projects that we have identified. So whether or not these percentages adjust over time, as you know, if projects need additional funding and that goes through our process, you know, if let's just as an example, let's say roadway elements, a project needs more funding. Let's say it's the county, and so that increases slightly. That we don't necessarily need to be tracking this snapshot, but what we do need to track is the overall 75%, 25% share up to 55% share. And this is how we start that. So this, I think it's important for us to document this somehow, just because particularly with the way that the plan was set up to meet these shares, we need to know where we're starting from and where we get to ensure that we follow through on our commitment to the board to get to work towards the city getting its 55% share. So that's all. But happy to add that disclaimer about this being a snapshot.
Well, and I appreciate that, Dan. And it sounds like, right, that it is representative of a baseline, right? It's that starting point. And so maybe that type of language is more appropriate than snapshot, right?
Sure.
That it's a baseline in accordance with or based on the plan, the proposed plan. And let me switch up, go to Mike Ortega, and then I'll come back to you, Catherine, and then John.
Sorry, Catherine and John. You know, I don't like to disagree with, particularly with the staff on this, because I appreciate the comments, but this is not a snapshot. This is, in fact, the way that this plan is allocated. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change over time based on conditions, but you got to remember, we went through a lot of gyrations at the board level, and ultimately, I'll use the term, the deal was these proportions or these percentages. And so I don't want to give the impression that this is a flexible number or that this is maybe not going to be the ultimate configuration, because that's not the spirit and intent. That's not the direction I got from the board. And so I just want to make sure that's clear. Now, clearly, if as we go down the path and we're finding it needs to ebb and flow, that's a conversation that can happen. But I don't want you to go in thinking that this is just a, you know, sort of a suggestion. You know, it's more than that. This is, in fact, the direction. And the reason we did this, and this was, by the way, taken off of General Maxwell's spreadsheet that he presented to the board, I forget whatever month that was, but these numbers reflect that. So the only thing we did was went through and made sure that all the math worked. Some of the numbers were changed a little bit in terms of the percentages, but nothing more than a few tenths of a percent. So again, Carmen, I just want to make sure you all are clear. This is not a suggestion. This is in fact where we're going and where we're moving forward. And our focus will be to maintain those percentages going forward. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mike. And I think it's important, right, then to have some language accompanying this appendice that says what it is, what it reflects, right? And so whatever that language most appropriately should be, I think should be reflected along with the appendice. Let me go back to Catherine and then John, and then we'll go to Sam.
Thanks, Carmine. My first point, similar to what Sam said, I'd like to understand these numbers a little bit more, but I can have that conversation offline with the staff to see the elements above that fed into these totals. I think I'm still struggling understanding what the goal and purpose. I understand this is definitely what the RTA board said we're going to move forward and vote on. This is the percentage breakdown. And so from that sense, it is a snapshot. It's the start of the program. I guess I'm struggling to understand, are we saying that, for instance, Oro Valley needs to get their $121,203,500 and stay right at that point? Is that going to become a negotiating point in 15 years? Are we saying they need to stay right at that 5.23%? That's where I'm struggling. I get it when we tie it to that the city gets a specific allocation of the par until we hit a benchmark. But I think I'm struggling to see, I mean, these percentages will change for the other jurisdictions as the city goes up. So kind of maybe more of a description of the use of this would be helpful for me. And when it's included, or should it be included in Appendix A, really kind of say why we've included it, because somebody will pull this out in 15 years and say we're not getting our fair share. And I don't think that's the point of this document.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to go through the committee member comments, and then Dan, I'll circle back to you and Mike maybe to wrap up. So you're hearing things you want to respond to. Let's get through John and Sam, and then we'll kick it back to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. We've talked all around the subject of what got us to not this point, but the next step, which was when we add the potential additional revenue. And I don't think we should shy away from reflecting that on this table. I mean, because quite honestly, 55% is a pretty substantial benchmark for the city of Tucson, and it should be for the region, since that's the deal, as we talked about, that got us here. So I think, number one, you add that to it. And the reason I'm particularly interested, I know this isn't supposed to be a publicity document or anything of that sort, but as we get out and educate the public on this plan in the near future, I think we're going to be talking about the city of Tucson getting their fair share, which has been defined as 55%, which will be reflected in this document as well. So I'm just saying, let's be consistent with our story.
So John, are you suggesting adding another row in there that shows an estimate of what the par distribution would be?
I am, Carmine. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Sam?
Thanks, Carmine, and thanks for that comment, John. I think the more clarity is not a bad thing. I just wanted to, kind of reiterate what Mike said. The idea of including this as an appendix is to memorialize these amounts that were essentially agreed upon by the RTA board. And then lastly, I just want to mention, as we were talking earlier about annual reporting of financial health, I'm sure there's some level of this that fits into that, like where I don't want to overcomplicate it for this conversation, but I think I just want to plant the seed that there's probably going to be some reporting piece tied to this down the road. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, Dan and Mike, so I'll defer to who wants to speak first.
I'll let Mike go first.
Thanks, Dan. John, that's a great idea. I had not thought about that. I think that's an excellent idea, because that does memorialize, kind of the conversation we had before about those potential additional revenue amounts. And so under each of those categories, each of the elements and then each of the jurisdictions, we'll put in a proportional amount of the potential additional revenue. And so it'll be real simple. We'll just take the amount that is for that potential additional revenue, and we'll just distribute it based on those percentages. So those percentages won't change. I think back to Catherine's point, the percentages will change, but the dollar amounts will go up, if that makes sense. Because when you add the potential additional revenue, the entirety of the program goes up. So instead of talking about 2.67 billion, we're talking in excess of 3 billion. And so I think that by showing that does bring a level of clarity. What I would suggest, though, so we don't make this so complex, I do think we should probably continue to show that blue line the way it is, and then have another line that shows what the total program is for the three billion plus. And that way it'll bring clarity and it'll show the we'll call it the new percentages based on that. I think there's value there. So anyway, I think that's a great idea, and that will really bring the clarity back to Sam's point. I think that'll bring the clarity to this document, and I also agree, Carmine, that we should outline very clearly what this is for, and that it does outline the breakdown. I think clarity is good. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Mike. Dan.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with that, we could certainly add the intent, and what I imagine that could look like is taking the conversation we had to start today, those 5 items related to PAR distribution and our recommendations there. We could add those as context below this, as well as in the financial section. Once highlighted to make sure that the board agrees with that, of course, in the TMC. But that could probably add some clarification to the intent here. But also, as Mike had mentioned before, this was the starting point of what the board agreed to as part of RTA Next plan. So this is where we're starting from, and this is how we intend to use those 5 financial PAR related decisions to ensure that we're working towards our commitment to the 75%, 25% split until the city gets its 55% share. So we could accommodate that text based on our earlier discussions today, as well as the intent. That wouldn't be a problem. As well as the potential additional revenue within the graphic.
Thank you. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of the input provided by the committee members and the willingness to, continue to bring clarity to the document. I did have one question that came up as we were talking. So for example, in the safety ADA active transportation element, we have projects or allocations listed in there for the city and for the county. And then there was a line item, right, of funding that was non-city future projects. How has that dollar amount been accounted for in the percentage breakdowns that are shown here, right? They're not allocated to projects. So from that perspective, we don't know what jurisdiction those dollars are going to land in for projects. How is that reflected in here?
Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Cut you off, Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to suggest that we go back and look at that and follow up, just to see if there are any programmatic type things that we need to clarify under the unallocated funding that hasn't been listed there already. But my understanding is that General Maxwell's effort accommodated all of that and the analysis. But we can go back as staff and confirm that.
All right, super.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to suggest, Carmine. And I know both Sam and Catherine mentioned that they'd like to see the breakdown or how these numbers came about. We were kind of peripherally involved in that. We were not privy to some of the conversations. I know that those conversations happened at the board level, and so we may not be able to answer all your questions, I guess is what I'm suggesting, number one. And then number two, I think the easiest way to do this is when we're looking at those potential additional revenues, distribute them across this spreadsheet just proportionally based on what's on this sheet now, and just leave it for now, and then we can have that discussion down the road. Is kind of how I'm seeing that.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other input from committee members? Okay, not seeing anything. Dan or staff, anything else you want to bring to our attention on this item, or are we set to move on then to item number 6?
I'm good, Mr. Chair, unless there are any other comments from staff. Okay. With that, Mr. Chair, for item number 6, we did just add one additional thing to our typical timeline and wrap up before we do that, which is just the administrative code table of contents. So when we started this process, we received some feedback that the entirety of the administrative code is a fairly lengthy document, 309 pages. And the POPs seems to be the critical component that jurisdictions were interested in getting to that information sooner. So we just wanted to open it up to see if there were any thoughts on how we want to restructure the administrative code moving forward. And I could share my screen real quick just to show what the table of contents looks like now. So real quick, under the current administrative code, we have this introductory information and legislative history, things of that nature. Ultimately, we get to the project descriptions, and then it moves into the accountability, oversight, and transparency section, which we just reviewed earlier today. And then it gets into the POPs. And then we have some additional information below that and appendices. So I guess the question is, do we want to consider restructuring it so the POPs and or the accountability, oversight, and transparency rises to the top, or if there are any other preferences related to how we organize this moving forward? And with that, I'll open it up to any questions or feedback.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Paul has his hand up.
Yeah, I would, because this code is a little onerous, if you put the meat and taters of the code up front and attach like the plan itself, the RTA plan as an appendice, that could make this a little bit easier to follow. And then question number 2 is, as you go through, you're going to be revising the front end of this thing, because I think there's a lot of explanation that goes into why are we rolling over particular projects, what projects are being rolled over, all that stuff. The current introduction is great for RTA 1, but we do need a brand new one for RTA next. And will this committee be able to get a chance to offer input on that at all?
Mr. Chair, if I may respond real quickly, in our past discussions, we kind of left it open-ended to either revisit that after March so that we could fully capture the process that we went through. One other item that we had discussed was potentially replacing much of what we have in the earlier sections before the project descriptions with the publicity pamphlet, or having that as an appendix. So I guess it's up to this, discussion to see if there's value in updating those sections, or if we just want to start this off with the POPs and then attach other important documents as needed, such as the publicity pamphlet, RTA Next plan, the jurisdictional breakdown that we just mentioned, and others.
I guess I'll jump back in.
Oh, go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I do think the history and the introduction of how we got to RTA Next is very, very important for this document, because many of us will not be here. Hopefully we're still standing, but we won't be part of the working groups later on, 10 years from now. And understanding that history creates context, like why is the city getting the 55%? Well, very specifically, it was determined during the analysis of why. So that what I'm trying to do is stay future arguments later on when everybody's scratching their head going, well, why did they do it this way? Because there is very intent purpose and there is very intent meaning as to how we got to where we are today. And that definitely needs to be talked about in prose at the very front end of this thing. I think a bold and comprehensive introduction is absolutely required.
Thanks, Paul. Any other thoughts?
And with that, Mr. Chair, we don't necessarily need to reorganize the structure of this. We can provide those updates for the earlier sections with what information is available, and then update to ensure that it's accurate mid-March. And then we could resend that out. We could have a follow-up meeting at some point to review that information, or after the election at the committee's discretion. But if there are no concerns with the current table of content structure, we could just adhere to this with the full package that we'll be putting together.
Any feedback? I'm sort of indifferent a little bit in terms of the organization of it, and more, I think, important for me is understanding, the time frame or the time sequence of things, and so what is it that we need to have in place by March 10th? And then what ability do we have to make adjustments after March 10th? I think those two questions would sort of help me a little bit give you a response, Dan.
So I think we want to have, oh, did Mike put his hand up there? I think we want to have everything packaged together for the TMC and the board. And so we just want to make sure that we're packaging that appropriately. But with that, to some of the earlier text, we may have to highlight some placeholders to confirm in mid-March to make sure that everything occurs as expected. So if everyone's comfortable with this structure, we could keep this and just go ahead and update some of those earlier sections. We did not yet because we wanted to focus on the policy side, the POPs per earlier discussion. I'm just bringing this back up based on that earlier discussion to close the loop and just make sure that we're organizing this in a way that's helpful for everyone for using it.
So if I can maybe paraphrase what I think I heard you say, is that we have the content that needs to go in this. It's a matter of how the content lays out in the document that we're discussing. I mean, I tend to feel that, making adjustments to it after the election only invites questions about why did we change it, right? And so, while technically not required of us to have it nailed down, right, in that sense, I think it's a good practice for us to leave it be, so to speak, right? Afterwards, that's just my own personal opinion on it. I mean, in this day of conspiracy, theorists, I just feel it's unnecessary to invite a question and criticism at best, and maybe challenge in the worst case scenario to moving things around. But I don't know, Mike.
So I would absolutely agree with you, Carmine, and that's why I suggested that we put this thing to bed and get it in place by January 1. Now, what I would suggest is that we not necessarily close the door to any kind of change, simply because in March we're going to know the outcome of the election. And so the references to RTA Next and some of those pieces I think are important, because now we'll know, right, going forward. But the meat, the body of the conversation that you all had is really, really important going forward, particularly, for RTA 1 as well. And so that's why I keep focusing on at least that component we implement and goes to work on January 1. Now, things like the spreadsheet we were just going over, that's not going to make sense if RTA Next doesn't pass, right? That becomes irrelevant. So those are the kinds of things we'll have to think about. To be honest, what I was hoping is that we'll call it the non-meat, that is the introductory comments and all the stuff that's those first, 4 or 5 sections, would be reduced pretty dramatically. I mean, Dan had mentioned 309 pages. When we started this, I really, really want to see us reduce that significantly. And I'm not talking 308, I really want to see it reduced because I think there's a lot of information in there that, quite frankly, is no longer relevant. And I think we can do it in a way that would be able to bridge the RTA 1 / RTA Next, timeframe. But, again, after March, I absolutely agree in terms of the meat of it, we shouldn't touch. But the pieces that are specific to RTA Next, those we could add in terms of language and qualitative explanation if necessary. That'd be my suggestion at this point.
Okay.
Carmine, we can bring back some recommendations on that. We'll take a stab if you all are okay with it. We'll take a stab at revising the actual non-meat, the language, the introductory pieces to that to reduce that language, and we'll bring it back to you all, and give you an opportunity to take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And I think then, that sort of flows into our next agenda, topic is, what's the timeline, right? Future agenda and timelines. So it sounds as though then, with respect to the organization of the admin code, staff will work through proposed changes to that and then bring it back. And then, so from a future agenda topic and timeline, it may be that, we convene at a point when you have something to present to us, but I'll defer back to staff to give us some input on what you think the appropriate next series is.
It's open for discussion. I would only say that the earlier parts of the administrative code are just objective information on the process. So I don't expect that that's anything that's going to be controversial. So with that, perhaps that could just be handled through a review just by email. And if we see anything that warrants debate or discussion, we could consider an additional virtual meeting as needed to resolve those comments. I just don't anticipate those comments being controversial, more just editorial in nature. So throwing that out, Mr. Chair.
Do we want to maybe put something, a placeholder on a calendar for the week following the December 4th RTA board meeting? At that point, it will have gone to TMC, their input, it would have gone on to the board. And do we, potentially need to reconvene to do something with feedback or direction provided by the board, or we can take a wait and see approach to it? I'm open either way, depending on what the committee's preference is. Paul?
I would definitely like to get a look at this before it goes to the board, or if it goes to TMC, actually. I mean, we are a subcommittee of TMC. We should see a final, the schedule should be based so that we at least get a look at it. And I agree with Dan that, if there's nothing more than just grammatical edits or, just non-controversial stuff that it keeps moving along. But if we do have something that does require debate, that maybe we need to get together before the 12th. If that's, just a last minute spit polish on the thing before it goes to the TMC and then onto the board.
And Dan, how likely are you able to fit in? So, we had asked that comments on the final, was it POPs or it was one of our, yeah, right, administrative code, well, the POPs, right? Any final comments on that document be back to you by November 5th? And can this be, can what Paul suggested be slotted in ahead of the November 12th TMC meeting?
Maybe challenging just from a schedule perspective to be able to address any comments, but I think our intent is to have the full package put together for that TMC meeting. So it's possible to squeeze it in. I'll let Mike go first before we provide any definitive response there.
And Mike, maybe before, let me ask Paul for clarification, right? We were talking about, what the process would be for the ordering, right? The ordering of the administrative code. And so Mike had offered that staff could take a stab at doing
Right.
that. Is that what you were asking for?
Yeah. So I think
to see before.
That's exactly, Carmen, that's exactly what I'm asking for, because as far as the POPs or the administrative code go, I speak for myself. I'm completely comfortable. We have debated this thing just over and over and over again. I think we've come to a great consensus amongst this entire group. No need to really kind of pick or choose on that. That should be solid and should be static in time now. I'm talking about all the other changes that we haven't seen yet. The staff will be doing between now and then to go ahead and create a polished document for the TMC and then the board to review. Unless you only bring forward the administrative code and the POPs. It depends on how you're packaging this up to go forward. I'm just a little uncomfortable since we're charged with the review of the administrative code to have it go forward with sections that we've never reviewed or discussed. Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, so just to reconfirm, this body has reviewed all components, starting with the project descriptions and beyond. Those earlier sections are really just the process to get us here. And so that's why I'm suggesting that I don't expect that that content, which Mike wants us to streamline and condense, I think that only equated to 15 pages or so on the original admin code for some of those earlier sections. So the question is, does this group really want to see that content and comment on that as part of this finalization process? The other components you've all reviewed. It's just a matter of packaging that all together.
Yeah, I think for me, and others can weigh in, I'm feeling we're hard pressed to take a review of those introductory sections that we haven't yet looked at prior to this going to TMC, right? I don't think we've got the luxury of time to enable staff to make some edits to that and the committee members to review it and provide feedback and incorporate that such that it can go to TMC. And that may not be what Paul was suggesting or maybe what we need to do. Okay, it is, right. Okay, you did say that. I think that could be a tall ask, but I'll defer to staff on it. I mean, in alternate, right, could we label that or shade that in such a way that it indicates that this is still pending review, right? Or segment out and say, this is what has been reviewed and discussed and updated and supported by this subcommittee, and these sections are still pending review and streamlining. So, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Time is not our friend, right? I mean, that's the bottom line here. Here's a thought. Here's a way to maybe think about it. And first, a question for you all. Uh, I will make the assumption that you have been keeping your bosses informed of our progress here, and or they will be informed on the body of the we'll call it the meat, right? The pops and those pieces that are after the project description. If that's the case, then on the 12th, there should be little conversation from them about this, if in fact the subcommittee reached a consensus pretty much on everything. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I know, and you can't speak for your bosses, I understand that, but just generally speaking, if you're on board and you've recommended that to them and they're on board, then there won't be a robust conversation necessarily about the meat. So that's one. In the meantime, what we could do is, I'll work with the team, and we'll come up with some language and the format and all things go along with that. Those first paragraphs, if you will, or sections, and get those to you as quickly as we can. My suggestion would be that you meet again on the 5th and that you go over those. We'll commit to having them complete by the 5th. I don't know that I can guarantee you we'll have them to you with a lot of time ahead of time, but at least enough time to read them. So, and because keep in mind that we've tried really hard to get all of the materials out to the board and the TMC at least a week ahead of time. And so the 5th is a week before the 12th. Okay. And so the whole conversation would have to happen on the 5th with the subcommittee. But that doesn't preclude you and the TMC from having more conversation about it on the 12th. And so if the meat, if you will, is not the biggest part of the conversation and you want to take a little extra time, you'll have that extra week by which to review those other sections that you haven't looked at. Now, we could move the TMC to the 19th. I'd rather not do that for some scheduling issues that I've already sensed, but that's another option. However, if coming out of the TMC, there's some conversations that still need to happen, or there are concerns by some of you or your bosses on those introductory sections, we can work closely with you up to and including, quote, a special subcommittee meeting before the 4th, so that we can try to hammer out whatever the concerns might be in time for the board. But keep in mind that I'm really trying hard to get this to the board a week ahead of time, and you've got the Thanksgiving holiday, which kind of I love Thanksgiving, but it kind of screws up our schedules a little bit. So I'm just kind of walking you through. We'll do our part. We'll get you some language. You may want to consider meeting on the 5th. We'll go over it with you. We'll try to get it to you ahead of time. Then we'll have another opportunity on the 12th to go through it. If there's disagreement or challenges at that point, then we'll commit to working between the 12th and, I'll say the 4th, to try to hammer those out before it goes to the board. And the reason I'm kind of focusing on that is if we can hammer all that out by the 4th, then we can say that we're going to implement this January 1. If it doesn't happen January 1, it happens February 1 or March 1, that's okay too. But the goal was really to start January 1. So I don't mean to put more work on you, but that is an opportunity to get to the final configuration.
I appreciate that, Mike. And I appreciate Paul, right, pushing us, because as, you know, we think about this, we've come a long way. We're so close, right? Can we wrap it up? And so, you know, maybe taking Mike up on the suggestion to plan a subcommittee meeting on the 5th, and then maybe we even log one for the 19th, which would be the week after TMC meets, right? So let's get those on the calendar to meet on the 5th. Let's look at what suggested edits to those introductory sections of the admin code are. Have TMC, you know, consider the entirety of what we've completed on the 12th. And then if we need to, come back on the 19th for any cleanup that then staff can carry into the December 4th meeting. So let me go. Dan, you had a thought after Mike had made his comments, and then I'll come back to you, Paul, and then see what others think about maybe logging meetings on November 5th and November 19th for the subcommittee.
Just something to consider is that we still need to do a little work internally to package this all this together and get it to you all, and go through our you know, quality control process. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of line editing for us. So with that, if we are to meet on the 5th, you'd be seeing it fresh. So I don't know that there would be a lot to discuss unless we're going to do a line by line review together on the 5th. One other consideration is with those earlier sections, which, you know, those are the only parts you haven't seen, the process, you know, leading up to this. Part of that is public outreach, and we're still in the middle of that. We're going to be doing that all the way up through March. And so we'll have some of that information, but some of that will need to be left as highlighted as a placeholder. So there are, you know, a couple things here and there that we'll just need to revisit after March to wrap up. But none of those items, the earlier sections, are policy related. It's just the story. It's just information. So it's important. As Paul mentioned, it creates context, but it's not going to change anything that we decided on as part of our consensus review to date. So just wanted to throw that out there. If, you know, with that, if you wanted to take a little bit of time to review things, we could, you know, mention that to the TMC, is that these first 5 sections are still under review if we're not quite there. And we intend to finalize that with the policy subcommittee prior to the 4th. So just throwing that out as an option, just so that we do complete it all, but making sure that we give you enough time to review the materials before we meet is just one thought.
I appreciate that, Dan. And I think if we just talking out loud, right? If we came together on the 5th and hadn't seen the revised content prior to then, we can go through it line by line. We started out with some of that early on. I mean, if we had it, as Mike pointed out, with enough time at least to read through it, even if we haven't fully assessed it, that, you know, would be advantageous. If we were to not do that on the 5th and then have TMC discuss it and then come back on the 19th and start touching things or editing, you know, those intro sections leading into the board meeting, we would not have an opportunity to provide any feedback to the TMC for them to consider, right? We would have then, you know, brought something to them. They would have commented on it. We would have continued to work, and then they wouldn't have seen it again before the RTA board. And so from that perspective, I understand there's downside to both of these approaches. I think we've got to plan for one or the other of them, and then go forward from that perspective. So Paul has his hand up, and then Jason, I'll come to you after that.
So Carmine, yeah, I'm in agreement, and I'm very sensitive to the time frame here, and I'm totally okay with doing a line by line on the spot on the 5th, because it is indeed not, as Dan mentioned, it's not policy, but it is important framework. And where I'm going on this is that at least we have a chance, and I think this committee has really shown how well it works together. We haven't had any we haven't had any knockdown, drag out fights. We've all been really working as a singular body together. the edits that we have offered through this process have been great. That we all, someone might think of something that nobody else thought of, and it ends up being incorporated into the document. So we've got a history of doing that now as this group. And where I'm going, if we can get together on the 5th, we can do that line by line. We can read it together, pull any last moment additions or subtractions that might help with the story. That would be advantageous. Now, let's just say worst comes to worst and we come up that we find that we need to do more work. Well, then I think we can identify to the TMC that we did indeed look at this and it does need some more work. And that way the TMC can expect that we'll be doing some more work after the fact for them. So that it's completely transparent. I'm also sensitive to what Carmine said, that if we did changes after the TMC gives it a blessing, I don't feel comfortable with that either. But if they know ahead of time that there might be an edit or two, then that makes that fine. But I fully expect, and I'll be Pollyannish on this, I'll fully expect on the 5th, we'll go through line by line. We may come up with an addition or two, and then we'll be good to go.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Paul. Jason?
Don't mean to throw a wrench into your timeline here too, but November 11th is a federal holiday as well, Veterans Day. So just FYI.
That's correct. Thanks for reminding us of that.
Then none of us have a meeting that day.
Any other input from committee members? On the table is whether we meet on the 5th. I think that's the primary one, right? I think we've got comfort with putting a meeting on the 19th. It's, do we meet on the 5th and make an effort, provided that staff can give us some draft edits on the introductory sections of the admin code.
We will have them finished by then.
All right. I'm not seeing any hands jumping up. Oh, Fausto, there you go. Thanks. Right on time. You saved me.
There you go. Yeah, I did that for you. Me personally, I would rather meet on the 5th and kick it out. The 19th is going to be challenging. I may not be available.
Okay. Thanks for that. Well, let's give it a go. And Dan, appreciate again, right, the Herculean effort by the team there. And I appreciate you keeping in mind the impacts on staff. So I think we're this close. Let's give it a try. And at least we can say we've exhausted every measure to try and completely update the admin code ahead of the TMC meeting on the 15th. So let's go ahead and log a meeting for November 5th. I would say, let's do 8:30 to 11:30, which has been our routine meeting time. Let's, at the point where you're able to share that with staff, and we understand it might be right call to order of the meeting, please do so. But let's go ahead and give it our best shot to see if we can button this last piece up.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. And with that, so we'll have the review of the sections before the project descriptions. Per your earlier comment, if anyone has any final errors that they noted to the POPs where we didn't successfully convert the matrix to the Word document, we could add that as a placeholder item in case anyone finds anything. With that, are there any other items, Mr. Chair, that you feel we need to accomplish as part of our next meeting?
Let me just see if there's any input from committee members.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
For some reason, the thing at the bottom that said to raise your hand was lost. It's back now. Anyway, I just want to let you know I have a conflict on the November 5th. I would love to be there, but I'm not going to be able to make it.
Okay. Appreciate knowing that, Bill. Okay. Not seeing any other hands raised or anyone else offering comments. I think we've captured it, Dan. So, you know, 2 tasks on the upcoming agenda, any final cleanup comments, and then also review of the staff proposed edits to the introductory sections of the admin code. So we'll go forward with that.
Very good.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn?
Thank you, Carmine and team. Really appreciate you all, as well as the internal folks as well. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone. So if there's no objections, we'll adjourn. Have a good day, and we'll see you on November 5th, 8:30. Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.